Hello friends, welcome back again to the channel. In this tutorial we are going to build a user management page using Next.js, Redux Toolkit, Axios and TypeScript. Don't worry if you are new to these tools. You are going to learn a lot as we will be diving deeper and deeper and deeper. So you are going to learn how to fetch users from an API that is using Async Thunks, how to fetch a single user when needed, how to undo loading and error states gracefully, then how to use Redux Toolkit Async Thunks for clean and scalable state management. Then you are also going to learn on how to set up Axios Interceptors to manage API requests and responses globally. So by the end of this tutorial, you will have a fully functional type-safe user page with clean state management and global API handling, perfect for building larger apps in the future. So without wasting time, let us go straight directly to our coding. So as you can see, I have already installed or I've already started a Next.js application. How to do that? You just do npx create next app at latest next up at latest you give it a name, the name you want. You can call it a tutorial, online tutorial, or a YouTube tutorial. Can just, let's say my app, then you can give it a template of TypeScript like that. So you can do like that, but unfortunately I've already done that, so I will not do like that because we want us to save time. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to clear that command. I'm going to clear that. Then I'm going to open my VS Code here on that tutorial, on that folder. So from my VS Code, you can now see that I used, this is Next.js 15. So I have the src folder here. And from the src folder, I have global.css, I have layout.txx, then I have page.tsx. Now, we want to understand state management. I had a tutorial that was explaining state management, but it had issues with the sound, and so I opted to redo again the tutorial explaining each and every concept in a clearable and understandable manner. So what I'm going to do, from src, I'm going to have a folder called Redux manage states. I'm just going to have a folder called state management like that. Then from this state management, I'm going to have a certain folder called features. Then from there, I'm going to have another folder here called what? Called store. Now I have laid out that project structure. Now from there, I'm going now to come to page.tsx. From these, I'm going to clear every content that you see here like that. Then I'm going to see RAFCE to render again the on page component. So what I'm going to do, I'm now coming back now to global.css. I want to clear everything. Let me just clear everything. Let me just remove background color. Then that color can just clear these things here. Let me just clear everything for the moment. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to, okay, let me just clear this and remain with that. Can just remain with that. Then you can now see, if I now come back and I open the application from the terminal and I do npm run dev, you give it some minutes to build. Then 3000 is in use by an unknown application process using available. Okay, we can work with 3004. So there's a Docker container running on port 3000. Let's work on 3004. So I'm going to open from 3004. Want to see everything. So when we come from the terminal and when we try to check what is happening here, we find out that everything is being rendered gracefully. That is fantastically. So I'm going to zoom and so that we can see everything in a very clearable manner. Then from there, what I'm going to do, I'm going to come now from the store. Of course, there are components that we have to work with, not components, libraries. And for us to do that, we have to install them. So what I'm going to do, I'm now coming back to our terminal. Then from the terminal, I'm going to say npm I install, that is npm install Axios. Then we give it like a minute to install. Then from there, I can just open another tab. I can say npm install at Redux.js toolkit. Is it this way? Toolkit, the Redux.js toolkit, then React Redux. Then from there, I can maybe come back and see, yeah, it has been successfully installed, the Axios. So we can now see that everything has been successfully installed. So what I'm going to do, I'm now coming to confirm from package or JSON. So from confirming, I can see that React Redux has been installed. Then at Redux.js toolkit has also been installed. Then Axios has also been installed. From now then, we can now proceed further to our application. So what I'm going to do, I'm now coming back to the store, and from the store, I'm going to define the store of our application. What we are going to use. So generally, when you are doing any state management, you have to define, that is when you are working with the Redux toolkit, we have first of all to define a store. A store is like a central point whereby your reducers will be managed from. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say store dot, I'm going to give it a capital letter, store.tsx. Then from there, what I'm going to say, I'm going to import something you call import configure store. Then from there, I can import. Then I can now come here and say export const store. Export const store is equals to configure store. Then this one receives an object, and this object will take something we call reducer that way. So what you are going to do, that has already been exported, but we want to export it in a default manner. Can we do it in a default manner? Let's export by default. Okay, let's do export default. We export the default store. So now we need some other components because we are working with the TypeScript. We need a type for dispatch called the root state, a type for use selection called the use state is equals to return type of store, return type of store dot get state, like that. Then of course we need app dispatch, type app dispatch. From type app dispatch is equals to type of store dot dispatch, that way. Then of course we need this one to be exported because we would want to use them in a different component. Or we can just say we can just have somewhere like types. We can just have a type somewhere. We can say we can just have a folder here for types. We call it types. Then from the types, what we are going to do, we are going to import. We are going to have something like index.tsx, like that way. Then what we are going to do, we will import store from state management store. Then from there, what we are going to do now, we are going to come and copy these two. Then from copying the two, we are going to paste them here. Then from pasting them there, we can now generally work with them from any point in our application. So we have completely worked on that. Now, there's something that is very essential and very important that we need to configure. We need to configure an Axios interceptor. So you might ask yourself, what is the need of Axios interceptor? Now, Axios interceptor, it is very good in so many ways. You see, instead of constantly defining your own API in different components across the application, what do you see if we come with a central point whereby you can call? If maybe you're working with the fetch, if maybe you're working with Axios, whereby we can define an API that will help us in logging out each and every request and response. Then we also add authentication tokens automatically on that API, something that is centrally located, that when we want them in a certain application, we don't have to keep on redefining or maybe redefining back again the token. So the importance of Axios interceptor, it gives the importance of having something like a login functionality whereby we can log in, we can give logs of each and every request that has been done. Then of course we can add authentication tokens. Then it also enables us to do something we call error handling consistently across the application. But now understand one thing, for our system to work, we are going to work with something called JSON typical placeholder, because we don't have a server. We can have a recording, maybe a tutorial sometimes to come with maybe our own backend. Then we try now to see how we can work with that backend with the front end and see how we can configure the whole authorization barrier tokens through the Axios interceptors. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come here and I say JSON typical. Let me just see JSON typical like that. From there I can just come here and say post or users. If I just do like that, everything is okay. So for me, I'm just going to have it. I'm coming to copy it that way. Then now what I'm going to do, I'm now coming back to the root of our application. Then I'm going to create a certain file called .env. Now this .env, it is a file that contains essential parts of our system. Things like important tokens, things like important APIs. If you don't want to push them maybe to GitHub, you define them at .env. Then you come now and define .env at .git so that when maybe you are pushing your code to the GitHub, the .env file is ignored. So what I'm going to do, I'm now coming here to define the base of our API. So I'm going to say next public, and understand, you can look at the naming convention that I'm working with, API base URL like that. Then I give it that because it's the base URL, I'm going to delete that. So look at the naming convention in Next.js. It's next public API base URL. When you are working with maybe React, when you're working with maybe Vite React, there's Vite base API like that. There's the naming convention that we follow. It's not in the typical way. Maybe we work with the Node.js, maybe Express, maybe Next.js. It's not like that. So there's the naming convention that we follow though. So the naming convention is next public API base URL. So what I'm going to do, I'm not coming back to src directory. Then I'm going to have a folder called API like that. I'm going to have a folder called API. Let me just define in a lowercase API like that. Then from this API, I'm going to have a file called api.tsx like that. Now, because now this one is not a UI component, we can just delete this, rename it just api.tx like that. So what we are going to do, I'm going to import the Axios, import Axios Then from there, of course, I can just say import Axios. Then of course I will need some other stuff there from Axios. Then I can now come back here and say const my API is equals to Axios dot something we call create. Then from that now we come back now here, we define the base URL like that. Base URL. Now this one is a little bit remember Next.js can do a full stack development, that is working with the Node.js for backend, but now we can use the Node.js criterion when we are dealing with Express, the way maybe we pull something from the .env file. So I'm going to say process .env dot, I'm now coming back to env like that. Then I'm going to copy this like that. Then after copying it, I'm going to place it there. Then from there, now I can now come here and say timeout. You have to define timeout of a system. We just want a timeout of 10,000. Then of course we need headers. We need headers. Of course we don't need this thing here. We need headers of something like of course you are working with content type. You need to define the content type is equals to what? Application JSON. Application JSON. Like that. I don't understand why these guys are underlining. Let's try and see. Of course this one is supposed to be an object. It's supposed to be an object. It's supposed to be like an object like that. Then from there, I'm going to say one thing. I'm going to say API dot interceptor. Of course, now we need something like a request logger. So we need a request. Okay, we need just a request interceptor. So what I'm going to say API dot interceptor. Then from interceptor, I'm going to say request dot use. This one is not an object, it's supposed to be use. So interceptor supposed to receive a function there, config. Then this one is supposed to be an arrow function, config. Then after now doing this config, we can now come back here and say console.log. We need something that maybe can see maybe something like a request logger, request sent. Then we need just to maybe have something like config method. I need maybe config.url like that. Then maybe you can now come here and say if maybe just in case maybe you have a token, you can name it const token is equals to local storage dot get item token. Then we can now come back here and say if maybe token and config.headers, maybe token and config.headers can just have something like config.headers maybe you can look at, can maybe work with authorization. Now we want maybe to give it a barrier, authorization bar. Maybe that is maybe if we have maybe a token, maybe want maybe to authenticate our user, things like that. Then maybe we return config. Now when you look at my config is complaining. Of course we need to specify the type here. You can just give it an any, but any does not make sense at all. We give it something we call internal Axios request config. That way Now this one came up with Axios. Let me see, from package.json, we are working with Axios 1.12. This is the newest version of Axios. So it came up with internal Axios request config. Then from there we can now come back here. We want maybe to check whether there is an error. So error, we need something, we need to give it an Axios error. Of course, when you do like that, it's automatically imported. That's why I left those curly brackets empty. So we need this one to be an arrow function. So what I'm going to do, this one is going to console. Let me just put this one to be a comma. I'm going to console.log, console.error. Request error. Error.message. Return promise. Reject error. API.interceptor. Of course, the same, we need something like we need to call this one now. We need to have something like a response interceptor. Now this one is going now to intercept the response. So dot response, we need the response to use what? Use so response, this response is going to use something called Axios response, which is our type, Axios response. Then this one is an arrow function. Then from the Axios response, we're going to maybe console.log response received. Then what we are going to do, we are going to response.status. Just want to display the status. Then response.config.url. Then what I do now next, you see now it's complaining. Now let me show you something. So I do what we call our return response. That way. So we have to return a data type that looks like what is in the function parameter. So I'm going to check whether an error will occur during returning of the response. So I'm going to say Axios error. Then from there, what I'm going to say promise dot reject error. Now that one is perfectly working. So what I'm going to do, just a minute. Okay, API response, API interceptor response use. Okay. Okay. On error, let me see. Because of course I have to. Okay, let me just have we need to console.log error. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy this, come back here and paste it here. Then from here I'm going to say response error. Then from here I'm going to say error.response. Response. Then I need to get the status code. Then of course I need to display the error message like that. Then from now there I can now maybe return promise dot reject. reject error that way. Then now I can now come back here and say everything is quite okay. Then I can now come back here and say just a minute, response interceptor, is it okay? Okay, for now we can just work with that. Can just work with that for the moment. So what I've done is that I've worked on an Axios interceptor. So I've configured our Axios. So there's so much configuration you can do apart from this. But what we have worked upon is we have configured the base part, that is API is equals to axios.create. Now this is what I will be calling in each and every API. Now we have configured a certain interceptor. Now this one is going to be now intercepting the request. So api.interceptors.request. So use. Now I have also configured response interceptor. Then from now there I can now come and maybe I can just say export API, but let's just do it in a well-educated manner. So export API. So what I'm going to do, I'm going now to be working with this API. But understand one thing, we are building something like maybe a user management page. Maybe to see how we interact with our user, we interact with our maybe Axios interceptors we work with, how we interact with maybe Async Thunks, how we interact with our slices, how we dispatch our actions. So what I'm going to do, I'm now coming back here from the state management. Then I'm going now to click features, and from the features I'm going to create something called user slice. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a slice here, and it's going to be users slice.tsx that way. Now there's no problem being an UI component. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to import certain components, certain items from at Redux.js Toolkit. Then from there I'm also going to import the API that way. Now this API that I'm importing, import API from API inside the API file. So what I'm going to do, I want to define the type of the user that I'm going to interact with. It's going to be of type maybe user. We are just creating an interface. Now what I'm going to do, you can just copy this one and pull it, bring it here on the types part of it. Then I'm going to say user, then export user. Then from here I can now maybe come here and define this user of mine. Can just say ID, of course it's going to be a number. Then I can just give us name of maybe type string, then email of type string, like that. Now from this point I also need another type, that is a type that is going to be now hosting the state of our system. So I need interface that is called user state. Now this is now what is now going now to, this one is a type or just a type. It's like a blueprint of how our user state will be now looking like. So I need users who will be like an array of user like that. Of course I need single user for the purpose of dispatching actions, that is maybe seeing how you can maybe send data from our UI component to our store. So that's the purpose of this user. I'll show you how we are going to work with him. So I need the user, I'm going to give him a type of null. Then of course I need loading all, which is supposed to be a boolean. So now this one will give out either false or true. Then I need loading single, which is supposed to be string. Then it has an option of null. Fantastic. So with this, what I want to do, everything is done quite fantastically. So I just need to export this. Now when I have exported this one, it's now accessible across anywhere in our system. So I now come back to our store and I do what? I import a user, import a user from types like that. Then import user state like that. Now I'm not supposed to import this one here. I'm supposed to import it at the user slice like this. So from there I can just import it like that. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to come up with an API to fetch each and every user from our JSON typical placeholder. And remember, that one is just an API that was created maybe to assist in maybe tutorials, to assist maybe developers when maybe they are trying their functions. It's not a complete real thing. It's just a fake API. So what we are going to do, I'm going to have a function to fetch each and every user from the API. It's going to be fetch, export fetch const fetch users. Users is equals to create async thunk. Create async thunk. Then this one will just receive just going to be, it's supposed to be of type this user like that. So create async thunk. When you create async thunk, of course we need to of course it has some parameters, it has some definition, user fetch users. Then of course we need something like async. We need what do we need here? We need async. Because we need a parameter there. Then we need a parameter. Of course, this one is supposed to be an arrow function. So what we do, this one will occupy something like that. Then of course we need reject with the value there. Then after now this, we can now come back here and say we want to try, then catch. Want to try, then catch. Then what are we trying? We want to try const response is equals to API dot get. This API dot get, it's going to return something of type user, but it's going to be an array. Of course we need the users here, users. Then from there you can maybe return response dot data that way. Return response dot data this way. And of course this one is complaining property data does not exist on type promise. Axios response user okay user slice. Did you forget await? What I'm going, okay, of course this one is returns a promise, so that one's supposed to be await. Now let's see, reject with value is declared but its value not used. Okay, now that one is not an error, it's just so what I'm going to do, of course here I have to catch an error, then supposed to be an error. Let's just give it of type any. Then I can now maybe reject, return reject with the value error like that, completely free now without errors. Okay, fantastically. So I can just maybe format everything. So now this one is for fetching all users. We have now completely fetched all users. So we need an API maybe to interact with our store, and this API now is going to fetch a single user. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do symbol export this one. Now this one, these functions, let me see, fetch all users. Now I can now come back here and say fetch single user. Now what we do now from there, we now const export const fetch user by ID is equals to create async thunk like that. Then this one now returns a single user. We don't need an array. From there, of course we need something like users fetch by ID. We need to give it a param there. Then from there, now this one returns a function which is supposed to be reject with the value. Reject with the value. Now from here is going to have try. We need to try. Then from try we need to catch. Of course we got in an error there. Then we do reject with the value this error. Reject with the value. Okay, reject with the value. Reject with the value. Reject is supposed to be, of course. Now this one takes something like a dictionary, takes something like an object. Now the reason why it is like that, it's because of one thing. It's let's see, argument void. Okay, void is not assignable to parameter type async. Okay, now I've just started by handling errors. By in my all approaches when I'm coding, I start with handling errors. But whichever the case, the most important thing is getting the work done and doing something within maybe the time that has been allocated. So I need maybe something like constant response is equals to await API dot get. Now we need a single user. From there now I need something like users. Let me just use template literals. Then I can just have ID. Now this ID we need to forward it from the front end. This ID, it will be now be this ID we will now need to work it through. We need now, of course we can now just come here and say can just edit there and do that. Of course you see now this one, but it's not making sense. You need something like a user ID. Now this user ID you can just pull it here, user ID, and it makes more sense like that. So of course I can now come here and say return response dot data. From there you see let's see, let me see, await expressions are only allowed within async functions. Okay, so this one is supposed to be async like that. Argument of maybe user. Okay, it's not assignable to type action below. Oh, what's the problem? Okay, what's the issue? Okay, let's define these types. Number, then this reject with the value, reject the value, give it something like a string. What's the wrong? Reject the value, we give it a string. Okay, just a minute. Users fetch by ID. Let's see. Okay, user ID reject with the value. Then of course we try response is equals to return What's wrong with this? Return. Now this one is supposed to be an error. Now the problem with this one now is type. Okay, supposed to be type here, supposed to be type any. Wow, it's like that. It's like that. I've stayed so much. I've been working with the state machines, and I've just stayed so much without working with Redux Toolkit. I've generally been working with the X-state and maybe meters for events like that. But let's flow on. The most important thing is to understand how the flow is going on. Then from there, you can maybe work with your favorite AI tool. You see, we are lucky at this era. We don't have to know or master everything. You can just understand how the code flows, understand how it works. Then you can maybe, to make work more easier, you can work with your favorite AI tool. But the most important thing is understand how things work. So from there, we need now to define our slice. So I'm going to say const user slice is equals to create slice, which will receive an object, create slice. The name of this slice is going to be users. Don't worry about the complaints. Then of course we need the initial state, which we have to import. The initial state, we need the initial state. Of course we have imported the user state. We need to define const initial state. Initial state, we need just to define it. Type user state is equals to an object. We need the users of user. We need the users. Which is an array. We need the single user, which is null in the beginning. Then we need loading. We need first of all to track when you are loading everything, which is false. Loading single, which is also going to be false. Then from there we need loading single. Boolean is not assignable to type string. Of course, it's supposed to be loading single. What did we give loading single? So loading single is supposed to be a boolean. Then we go back to user slice, but of course now that one is okay. Now we need error all. We need something like an error all, which is supposed to be, of course we have not defined it here. We need an error all, which is supposed to be either string or null. Need error single, which is supposed to be string or null. Error single is supposed to be string or null. Then from there I can just come back to user slice. We need error all, which is supposed to be string or null. Error all, let's just give it null. Then error single, let's just give it null. Then from there we can just work with our initial state. From there, we need the initial state. Then from there we need something we call reducers. But remember, we are working with async thunks, so we need something we call extra reducers. This never is not assignable to type. Users, initial state. Of course this one is supposed to be a dictionary, I'm sorry. Then we can now come back to extra reducers, which takes an arrow function. Let's take a function param called the builder. Then now this builder has to return something. Now from this builder, we want to define our cases. So from builder, like that, just have to define the first one, add case. We want to add our cases. So on fetch users, fetch users dot fulfilled. First of all, we begin with the pending dot pending. We check the state. Then from there we can maybe come here and say state dot loading all is equals to true. Then of course we can now come here and say state dot error all. We need to define the first error is supposed to be null. Now this one is supposed to be true, not tree. True. Now this one is supposed to be equals to null. Now from there we need to add another case. Now the first case, we are checking when the users are pending. Then we can now do add case. Then from the add case, we fetch users dot fulfilled, like that. Then from there, I can just do state then action, state then action. Then this action, I can just import action payload, payload action. Can just come here and say this is of payload action. Payload action. I don't know if it has been imported. Then payload action. Now this one is supposed to be a type, but Next.js is completing that. So payload action, from the payload action, so state dot loading all is equals to of course false when everything has been fulfilled. Then state dot users is equals to action dot payload. State.users is equals to action.payload, payload, like that. State.users. And I can now come here and check what is the issue. Type void. Let's see. Of course it's supposed to be, of course we need a user there. Then so state dot users, you can just give it any, but we are working with the type safety. So state.users is equals to action.payload. So with that one, we can now add another case. We need to check whether everything has been rejected. So fetch.users.rejected. Rejected. Now from the rejected, I'm going to check the state, then the action. The state, then the action, then I'm going to return something. I'm going to say state.loading all supposed to be false. Then state.error, error all. Error all is supposed to be action, action.payload, action.payload or a non-error. Action.payload or a non-error. So if I now come back, this one is complaining. Type, okay. It's not assignable to type string. Let's see, error all. Error all, okay. Error all. Error all. Then I can now come back to, let's see, error all. Then I can now come back to maybe use state C, error all. So what is wrong with my error? So let me come here and see. Let me see what's wrong with our error. What's wrong with my error here? Error all is equals to action.payload. What's wrong? Fetch users.rejected state action. Okay. State.loading all false. State.error all is equals to action.payload, a non-error. Type is not assignable to type string. Error all string null property. Let's see. Let me try delete this. What's wrong? For now, let's just work with the what's wrong. Type is not maybe payload.error. Of course. Let me see. Type a non-action payload action. Let's just give it a type of any. Of course, now it's working, but I don't know why it was complaining. Of course, now this payload action comes in form of an object. And you see, we had already defined an error all, like maybe a string or maybe a null, but it cannot be an object. So maybe I can just come here and delete this and try to see if inside the object we have a message. See now, error. Can just give it a type of any for the time being. Type of any. Now action.payload error all. So what I'm going to do, I'm now coming now to duplicate all of these ones down here, because it's almost the same. Now this one I'm going to undo the single user. Now this one is going to be fetch user by ID. Now it's going to be loading single. Now error single. That way. Now this one is just going to be the same. I'm just going to copy everything. Then I'm going to try to command D, then delete everything, then just paste it there. Then now from here I can now come here and say loading single. I need single user here. Then I just say state.single user like that. Action.payload. So what I'm going to do here, I just need loading single. So I just need loading single like that. So by here I'm just going to say loading loading single is supposed to be false. Supposed to be false. Then it's state.error single like that. So with that, everything is now set. I can now come back here and export. What I'm going to do, I'm going to export user slice, export default. Let's just export it by default. Export default user slice. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to check the name of our users. I'm going to copy the names. Then from copying, I'm going now back to our store. I'm going to say import user slice like that. Then I'm now coming back here. I'm going to say users dot user slice dot reducer. That way. Now from defining it this way, what we need now, we need to, number one, let's look at whether our application is running. So it's running quite fantastically. So what we need now to come and define this provider here. We need now to come and define the provider. We need now to come and define our own provider. So what we do is, let me come just now here and define a component, maybe a folder called providers. Now from this folder, I'm going to define Redux provider .tsx. Then from here, I'm going to say RAFC. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to import something called a React node. Now this one is a type. Now this React node, I'm going to import it with maybe type this safety like that. Then from here, I need children. I just need the children here who will be displayed. Then I can now come back here and say can now say children. Want to give it a prop, we need maybe children dot react node. So by doing that, we have now done everything. Then I can now come here and display our children. Remember, I want now to go and configure this one at the layout.tsx because of one thing. I cannot configure there directly because layout.tsx is a server-side component, and it's designed like that because it's the entry side, it's the entry file to our Next.js application, and it has to be server-side. So remember, we will need now to maybe use something like use client, which will not work by there. So if I maybe want something like use client, so it will not work at layout.tsx. That's why we can just create a component here, then use it at that point. Then what I'm going to do, I'm now coming here and I'm going to import my store. Import store. Import, is it did I name it like that? Import store. Okay, from state management. Then I'm going to import provider. Import provider from React Slice, from React Redux, from the React Redux. So what I'm going to do, I'm now coming here from React Redux. Then what I'm going to do, I'm now coming here and I'm going to command like that, delete right provider. Then from there, I'm now going to define my store. Store is equals to store, like that. Now from this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to import this one from the layout.tsx. So I'm going to do what? Import. Let me just clear everything. There is no need of clearing. Let's just work with what we have been provided with. Then I'm going to do what? Import Redux provider. Redux provider, that way. So what I'm going to do, I'm now coming out to clear this. Then now come back with our Redux provider here. And now display the children from there, from that direction. If we try to do that, still our application is running quite fantastically. Now, we have already configured Axios interceptors, we have already configured slices, we have already configured the store. What now we need to do, we need now to come back to maybe our page.tsx, and we need now to work with our interceptors. We need now to work with not interceptors. We need to work now with our slice. So what we do, number one, we can be disappointed. I see what's the volume? Okay, 25%. So now what we need to do, we need to come back here. First of all, we need to make this one a client component. Use client. So from here, I can just come and clear. Then of course, once we enter into the system, we need maybe first of all to use effect, because there's something we need first of all to be fetched. Then of course we'll need something called use state. Then of course we will need import root state, the one that we had defined. Root state, import app dispatch. It's not supposed to be there. Import a root state from types, like that. Then now from here you can now maybe pull app dispatch that way. And remember, Next.js is not complaining, because we should have imported with the type here, the way we do it in React and Vite, because there's a way React Next.js itself is maybe there, it's done. So from there I need to work with import uselector Then of course I will need use dispatch that way. Then from there I can now come back here and define const dispatch. It's equals to use dispatch. Use dispatch that way. Now from this use dispatch, I need now to come back now and now come here and say of course const because we need now to use selectors to select our users. It's equals to use selectors. Then from this use selector, you need maybe a state, which will be of type use state, root state. And of course, you need state.users that way. Then from here, we need maybe to come back and maybe do this. I need users. From these users, I need single user. I need loading all. Then I need loading single. Then I'm just going to error all. I need error all. Then I need error single that way. So we pull everything now from the slice. Now I need, once I log in, when the component is mounted, I need to use effect. Then this use effect, we need to fetch the users all. So I'm going to say dispatch, fetch users all, fetch users, which is supposed to import itself. Then I'm going to have so this refetching will be, let me see, fetch users. What's wrong with this? So this dispatch, okay, dispatch is supposed to be app dispatch. Let me just have app dispatch. Supposed to define the type. So I need this one to be re-rendered when dispatch changes. So from there, you can just come here and see whether the application is still running, to see whether we are on track or maybe we missed the track. And everything is quite fantastic. So what I'm going to do, let me just let's just work with that. So what I'm going to do, I'm now coming now to h1 tag 1 like that. Then I'm going to say users. Then from there, I need to have I need to check whether first of all it is loading all. If it's loading all, we need to display a tag that is loading all users. Then this one will be a p tag, that is paragraph. Just need something to take track of what is happening to okay, what has happened here? What's wrong? Let's see. Supposed to be loading all users. Then we need to have something like that. Let's see whether it's working. Okay, everything is quite working, so we can see loading. So let's see whether there are errors. So error all. So in case there is an error, we are going to maybe p error all like that. So there is, let's see whether there is an error. So there is not an error. So we need now to display the users. So what I do is li, I'm going to list a component here. So users dot map. So from this I'm going to map user will be of type user like that. Then from this can just have it this way. Then I can just have li this way. Then I'm going to have a key. Of course this user is going to be user.id. Then from there I can now come here and say we just need user.name user.name, don't know why, user.name, then I need user dot what shit, I need user.email .email. Then from there I need user.email. Is there anything else we need? I can just have some there like this. Then from this we can just now refresh our application and see if everything is okay. So quite fantastic, everything has been displayed. So we now see every user from our system. We now see every user, but now we need now to come up with a functionality now that we can now see how we can, you see, we are fetching data from the store. We need now to come up with a functionality through which now we can send the data from the store. We can send data from the user to the store. How do we do that? Now let's do this. Let's add a button in each and every li tag, and this button will be a button for, let's just have a button. This button will be view details, like that. So view details, let me just add let me just have a style here. Let me just give it a small styling. Background, of course, we need it to have a background of black. No, do we need a background? Border, you just need it to be border, we just need it to be 2 pixels solid black. Let me see if it's working. Oh, that one is not working. Border solid black. So we need a border of 2 radius solid black, which is quite fantastic. So what I'm going to do, I'm now coming back. Let's give it a margin bottom of margin bottom, not that one. Just come and give this one style. Just need something that looks a little bit neat. Margin bottom, just give it something like 10 pixels. So you look at, there's a little bit of differentiation. Then I can now come back here and say margin right, margin left, which is supposed to be 10 pixels, which is not supposed to, we should not style like that, but we are just doing a normal tutorial. We are not learning CSS. So from there I can just come here and copy this, and I can now come here and say what? I can now come back here and say loading single like that. So loading single user like that. Then from here I can say error single. Then I can say error single. But now remember, we just need to display every user there. Now we have a challenge. Now this one will display one user, but how will we get the user? So we need to have a function through which maybe you can get the user. So you need to have a function called on click here. Then on click we need to execute something. Is equals, we just need maybe you can just have a state const selected user ID is equals to set selected user ID. Set selected user ID is equals to use state. From this use state, I'm going to have something like which is supposed to be a string, a set selected user ID. So it's not supposed to be a string when we're working with the typical. We need to work with something like a number there, and it can also be null, so that now we can now come back here and give it null. I don't know why that one is misbehaving. Can now come back here and give it null like that. With now that one, we can now come here and set selected user. So with that now, we can now come back here and say on click this set selected user ID we need set selected user ID. From now this, we need something like a user.id. Now when we do that, we have already set the selected user ID. Now we need now to check the state of the selected user ID if it changes. If it changes, we need to have a use effect here that now if this selected user ID changes, we are going to automatically trigger the fetch to work. So selected user ID like that. So it is going to work like that, or when maybe dispatch. Okay, one blunder is we are not putting it maybe in a dependency array, so we need dispatch. So this function is going to work under any dispatch or selected user ID, that way. So which function we need? If selected user ID is not equal to null, when it is not equal to null, so that we avoid pre-rendering, we need to dispatch fetch single user. We need to dispatch fetch user by ID. Then this ID is going to be selected user ID. Selected user ID. So let's now display that here. So how we do that is very simple. We need to have something to check single user ID, single user, and also single user is not loading. Single user is not loading, like that. Then okay, then it's not error single. It's not error single. Div. I just need a div there to display my data. Then from the div we need to maybe you can just have a style. That is, maybe we are going to get the margin top, which is now supposed to be 2 rem. Then what we are going to do, we are going to do h2. We just want to selected, we just want to have an heading user details, selected user details. Now from there we just need to see the user that we have selected. We just have a p tag there, name of this user supposed to be single user dot name, like that. Then from there what I want to do is I just duplicate this here at bottom. Then I just need this one to be an email. Then I just need single user dot email. Then I just need ID, single user dot ID. And with that, everything is fantastic. With that, everything is fantastic. So I can just hide our VS Code like that. So I can just refresh, and I can just come here and select this linigram sincere, like that. So loading single user displayed. So if I now come back here and I select Curtis Winsat and I select her, loading single user, Curtis Winsat selected. I can now come and here select Clementina Dibugu. I can just select it, loading single user selected. If I now do inspect and we try to see what is happening, you can now see this is the work now of Axios. Axios is helping us maybe to console.log what is happening. So API.ts. So if I now come back here to console.log response received, response of status, like that. Response received. Now that is the work of Axios. So with that one said, today we just looked at the minimalistic view of state management. I had a video on this, but it was utterly interrupted a lot by sound issues by then. So we still need more time to interact with event state management in an event-driven way. so that we can interact with maybe something like event emitters, so that we don't interact directly with our slices. We can always have an emitter that maybe we can fire a certain event, and that event maybe configures or maybe dispatches a certain action. Now that is very good when it comes to building highly scalable systems, because it enables you to build things that are very, 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 very system decoupled. Remember, the goal or what we want to do is that we want to reduce coupling, and we want to ensure that our system is very, 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 very decoupled. So for that, I will have to come up with another tutorial and dive deeper into state management in an event-driven way. And we go deeper, we see how we can maybe work with emitters, we see how maybe can dispatch events on the front-end side. Then we can also come up with a custom backend and see how things will now work. So enough of that is said. If whatever I've displayed has interested you, you can subscribe, share, and like, so that my channel can grow and we can now continue reaching more and more people. Thank you and have a beautiful moment.